All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I see some participants are joining us now for our virtual town hall meeting. We're going to give this a couple more minutes. I'd like to kick this off at 6:02. So please stand tight for just a few minutes and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, so I've been watching the participants grow. I think we're at near where we're going to be for the evening. Thank you all for joining us for this virtual town hall meeting. It's a virtual meeting because we're coming to you from wherever you're at. Maybe you're watching from your living room or your kitchen, or perhaps you're eating dinner right now watching us. So thank you for allowing us to join you for this project, the WW2 and WW3 Warson Woods Sanitary Relief Project. This is a significant project that is going to be impacting 5 communities in the area, nearly 2 miles of gravity sanitary sewer. So again, thank you for joining. My name is Stephen Roberts. I am a project manager with MSD, the design group, and we have a whole team of folks who are here to help get you familiar with this project and what it's all about. I'd like to have them introduce themselves right now. First of all is going to be Kurt Kimmel from Burns McDonnell.
Hello, I'm Kurt Kimmel with Burns McDonnell. As Steve said, I'm the project manager for Burns McDonnell. We are the engineer hired by MSD to design this project, and I will be presenting some slides a little bit later in the presentation. But to continue the introductions, I will kick it over to Andy Likes.
Thanks, Kurt. I'm Andy Likes. I'm with the Vandiver Group, and we're the public engagement consultant on the project. So we're here to help tell you a little bit of background on the project and where we're headed. And we're also going to talk more about questions here in just a moment. Steve?
Thanks. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Andy. We also have a few other folks who are sort of behind the scenes right now. One of them is Craig Berry. He's with our right-of-way group. These folks are the people who are going to approach property owners where we need easements to construct our sewer. With nearly 2 miles of sewer, we're going to need between 50 and 60 easements to build this project. We also have Steve Kadike. He is with our construction group. And quite often, a lot of the questions we get are people who are curious about how is construction going to impact their roads and access and this sort of thing. So he's here to help us with that. Lastly, we have Sadamir. He's the guy who's kind of running the show electronically. He's also going to field a lot of the questions. So with that, let's kick off this project. Andy?
Great, thanks, Steve. I'm going to tell you a little bit of background of where we're headed for the next little bit tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about technology first and some of those ground rules. This is a little bit different than our typical public meetings, so we want to make sure that everybody knows how this is going to work, and we certainly appreciate you getting on your computers or getting on your smartphones and joining us this evening. We know your time is incredibly valuable. We want to be very mindful of that time. We're going to give you a little bit of overview on MSD Project Clear as a whole. Then we're going to jump down to some project specifics and what exactly this 2 miles worth of sewer project is going to do, where it's going to go, and why it's so important for these municipalities. Along the way, we're going to have some questions that we're going to get from you. We're also going to have some questions that we've already gotten from a lot of folks in these meetings. We want to make sure we answer those. And then we're going to get to the Q&A. Very important. We're going to have two different kinds of Q&A tonight. First are going to be the questions that are going to be applicable to everybody in this meeting. The others are going to be ones that are much more property specific. I'm going to get into that here in just a moment. But first, some notes on our virtual town hall public meeting. Everybody in the meeting is in listen and view mode. That means your camera is not live, your microphone is not live. You may say, Andy, how are we going to answer or ask questions? We want you to type your question into the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. If you toggle your mouse, whether it's on your keypad or a separate mouse, a screen will pop up at the bottom. There is a Q&A feature in that screen. We want you to type your question in there at any time. You can start now if you know you have a question that you want to ask this evening. We'll list those questions out and answer as many of them as we can. Everyone can read all of the questions posed. So if you have a question that's very similar to someone else that's already asked a question, why on my street do we need to do this? If somebody has that same question, we want you to use the upvote feature so that we can answer all of those questions. But we want to be mindful of time, so we don't want to get the same question over and over again. But we definitely want to make sure that we get you some answers. I want to talk a little bit more about the questions that we're going to be able to answer tonight. We're only going to answer questions in the main part of this meeting that are related to this project. So if you have questions related to an adjacent project or another part of MSD, this isn't the place for that. We're going to get you in touch with the right folks through the phone line through MSD downtown in St. Louis. So if you have something that's outside of that, hold on to that. We're going to give you a website that or an email address that we can send those questions to as well. If you would prefer to ask those questions, that's fine as well. So a little bit more background now on MSD Project Clear. MSD, believe it or not, is two utilities in one. It's kind of like the power company and the gas company together. They're a wastewater utility and a stormwater utility. The wastewater utility takes the drains from your sinks, your sump pumps, lots of different things, and takes it to the wastewater treatment facility. There are 7 treatment plants around the St. Louis area. They treat roughly 350 million gallons of wastewater a day. That's a day. It's the 4th largest sewer system in the country behind Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. MSD is also a stormwater utility. Those two utilities have 2 different funding sources. If you have a stormwater question, tonight is not the time for that. We will get you in touch with customer service. We are only talking about the wastewater portion of MSD tonight. That wastewater portion serves 1.3 million customers across the St. Louis area, across 88 different municipalities. So there's a lot of sewers underground, and we're always needing to add more, which is why we're here tonight. So with that, we're going to turn it over to our experts. Steve mentioned we had several people on the line. We have Kurt Kimmel from Burns & McDonnell and Steve Roberts, who you've already heard from. We're going to begin the next section with Kurt.
All right, thank you, Andy. I introduced myself earlier, but again, if you for some reason were late getting on the call, my name is Kurt Kimmel. I'm the project engineer for Burns & McDonnell. We can go to the next slide, Andy. So one of the common questions we get at these meetings from participants and from property owners is what is the reason for this project? Why does MSD have to build this project? And for this project, I've listed 3 things here, and they're all kind of related to each other. So the big reason behind this project is that the existing sanitary sewer is just not big enough. So Andy mentioned, wastewater sewers on the previous slide, and I just wanted to clarify that wastewater and sanitary are one and the same. So sometimes they're called wastewater, sometimes they're called sanitary sewer. The project itself is called a sanitary relief sewer, and that's generally how I will refer to that over the next couple of slides. So I just wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion there. We are talking about the sanitary sewer that, like Andy said, it collects things you flush down the toilet, your shower drains, sinks, and that kind of and those kind of flows, rather than the storm water, which is basically just rainwater. So with the existing sanitary sewer being undersized, what happens in the project area currently is that the sewer is just not big enough to convey the flow. And historically, what happens when there's not enough capacity in the existing system to convey that flow, it surcharges that pipe and goes out the lowest point possible, which has been basements. So in our project area, there's quite a bit of history of complaints from basement backups, and that is due to the undersized nature of the existing sanitary sewer. So when basement backups became prevalent decades ago due to these undersized sewers, one of the common practices was to construct sanitary sewer overflow outfalls. Now I'm going to take a little bit to explain what those are as well, because it's not a common phrase that everybody is familiar with. But basically what happened, again, common practice decades and decades ago, was to construct a relief valve type connection between the sanitary sewer and the storm sewer. And what that allowed things to do is basically that overcharged flow, instead of backing up into people's basements, it would go through this relief valve into either a storm sewer or a storm channel. But really what that was doing in general was allowing diluted, untreated wastewater sewage to enter the storm waterways. So with the passage of the Clean Water Act and things of that nature, this was it became a prohibited practice. So there are 3 of these constructed sanitary sewer overflow outfalls in the project area, and based on the consent decree agreement between MSD and the US EPA and Missouri Coalition for the Environment, these 3 constructed SSO outfalls have to come out. So the next bullet here is talking about the project goals and benefits. That's really just kind of a reflection of the reason for the projects. And again, that's to alleviate that sanitary sewer surcharging, alleviate building backups that occur during rainfall events, and doing that all while being able to remove those 3 SSO outfalls that are currently allowing diluted wastewater into the local waterways. So next slide, Andy, please. Okay, so this is a really zoomed out version of the project area. In the next 3 slides, I'll really get into smaller, more zoomed in versions of this. But as Steve mentioned, this is it's a very large project. The different color codings on this slide will show you the different municipalities. At the very top, I'll call that a salmon color, I guess. That is the city of Ladue. At the top right, the greenish color, that is Rock Hill. Kind of in the middle left, the tannish color, where Andy's cursor is, that is Warson Woods. Toward the bottom on the right middle, that bluish color is Glendale. And then the bottom left, the hot pink, is Kirkwood. So as you can see, this project extends from Old Warson Road. That's the road that runs east-west toward the very top of the red line. So it extends from there 2 miles toward the upstream and ends at Brownell Avenue. And each of these black circles that you see, they'll be more visible when we zoom in. Those are those sanitary sewer overflow outfalls that we're talking about. So we'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit and kick it to the next slide. So as you can see with this slide a little better, this is the downstream end of the project. The red circles and the red line work indicates the sanitary sewer itself. So as you can see, this project starts in the pink area that is Ladue. There's a creek that runs northeast through this part that runs under DePere Avenue and then runs under Old Warson Roads. We basically start along this creek and construct parallel to that creek, which runs in the backyards of some properties there that front on Old Warson Road and front on DePere Avenue. And then once we hit DePere Avenue, the construction will be within the right-of-way itself, so within the pavement limits. And that pretty much continues as we move south, which is down on the slides, to Hudson Avenue. Hudson Avenue is an east-west road that where we kind of jog over to the left on your screen, and then we're in Warson Woods Drive. So once we kind of jump over into the tan area there, which is Warson Woods, the proposed relief sewer will be within the roadway limits of Warson Woods Drive. So next slide, please, Andy. So this is, kind of the middle part of the project area. As a kind of frame of reference, Manchester Road is that, you can see the label there, but it kind of runs from the bottom left of the slide to the middle right of the slide. So if you just have a frame of reference there, that's Manchester Road. But as we pick up the sewer in this area, again, the tan area is Warson Woods, and the proposed relief sewer will be within the roadway right-of-way. As we get to that first SSO, that's a good landmark. Andy, if you want to put your cursor on that first SSO, the black symbol there, that first SSO is at the park entrance to Royal Oaks Park. I think it's also referred to as Memorial Park, but that's where Warson Woods Swim Club is and the pavilion. So again, to kind of get your frame of reference there, that's Warson Woods Road or Warson Woods Drive right at the park entrance. And that SSO will come out. Currently, it's connected from the sanitary sewer to that stormwater channel that's at the park entrance. So as we continue upstream, which again
Kurt, let me interrupt here for just a second. We have a question that would probably be good since you're talking about SSOs right now. It looked like on the big map to one of our attendees that there were 4 outfalls, and we're only replacing 3 of those. Can you explain that?
Right. The one on the top, if you want to go back to the previous slide. That's an SSO that's already been removed. For some reason, the symbology still pops up on the mapping, but that's no longer an active SSO.
So that's the one at the top of the screen?
Correct. So if you go to the next slide, it's the one that shows up in the zoomed in version there.
Right at Wild Deer there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there's your answer, and it's just that easy to get some questions answered along the way. So
that's very astute, and I apologize for the confusion there. But yes, that's a great catch. You did see 4 on the large photo there, but there are 3 active ones that we'll be taking out. So good question. For those of you in Warson Woods, I mentioned the swim club. Andy's, oh, that's my cursor, sorry. So as you can kind of continue to go to the south, which again is down on the screen there, we're going around that swimming pool. So we'll be in the kind of the grassy area, the tree area. So there'll be pretty minimal impacts on the swimming pool at the Memorial Park there. As we continue to go south across Manchester, that will be a tunneled crossing of Manchester Road. That's a MoDOT roadway and a MoDOT requirement that we tunnel under that. So what that means is we won't be digging from the surface across Manchester Road. So that'll be a tunneled crossing from the north side of Manchester across the Glendale Chrysler property to the south side of Manchester. And from there, that's where we start to get into some of the residential neighborhoods in Glendale. And The southernmost piece of this, which is, the lowest point, the lowest red line on this slide, basically shows the sanitary sewer along some back property lines. So it'll be constructed along back property lines for those properties that front on Brookside Drive and those that front on the cul-de-sac of Glenway. So right around where above Andy's cursor there is another one of the SSOs, and that basically connects from a sanitary sewer manhole at the Glendale Garden condominiums to a big storm culvert that runs along parallel to our sewer. So that's the second of 3 SSOs that will come out. And you can go to the next one, Andy. And again, there's a little overlap here. So the very top red line with that SSO symbol, that was shown on the previous slide. There's just a little bit of overlap there. But as we continue upstream in the project, the sewer will be located in Glen Elm Drive for just a couple hundred feet, and then we'll proceed south along Glenway Drive. Again, that'll be within the roadway limits. And when we get to the point where we turn west a little bit, where Andy's arrow is, again, we'll be along some back property lines for those properties that front on Glenway and the Brookhaven cul-de-sac properties. Once we get to Alexandra Avenue and Alexandra Drive, there's kind of the project kind of splits into 2 pieces, one of which goes up Belson Court in Kirkwood, and another which continues along the back property lines of West Oak Drive until our very upstream manhole in Brownell Avenue. And then the third SSO symbol there, that's a manhole in Alexandra Avenue that connects to a large storm sewer that runs parallel to our sewer. So that's another SSO that will come out. So with all that being said, I kind of just wanted to put a bow on what we just talked about. As a couple people have mentioned before, this is almost 2 miles of sanitary sewer. In general, it'll be in the 10 to 12 foot range, maybe to 14 foot on average, but it'll range altogether from somewhere between 10 feet deep in some locations to 25 feet deep in other locations. And the majority of it is either 30-inch in size, 30-inch diameter, or 24-inch in diameter, but it does decrease in size as you go upstream. So the size ranges from 8-inch to 30-inch. And then, as I mentioned in those previously identified SSO symbols on the project map, we will remove those 3 constructed SSO outfalls. So next slide. So the majority of the sanitary sewer itself will be constructed with a method we call open cut excavation. And really what that is in layman terms, is just digging a hole from the surface. So, common trenching is how most of the sanitary sewer will be constructed. So there'll be a linear excavation where, a track hoe or a similar piece of equipment digs from the surface down to the elevation where the sewer needs to be placed. And that's how a majority of this sewer will be constructed. I mentioned the tunneled crossing of Manchester Road. Tunneling is basically a way to install the sewer underground without open cutting the entire alignment. However, even with a tunneled approach, it can limit disruption along the alignment, but there are still some significant excavations. The location where they put the tunneling equipment into the ground is generally a 40-foot by 20-foot shaft. We call it shafts, we call them pits, but really they're 40-foot by 20-foot holes in the ground where we launch that equipment from. So again, we're looking at a tunnel crossing of Manchester Road. So even though we tunnel the roadway to avoid cutting Manchester Road, there's still will be some disruption on either end of that tunnel, basically because we have to dig 2 holes to put the tunneling equipment in the ground and then take the tunneling equipment out of the ground. So with that open cut excavation, that will be a majority of the construction methods. You can expect the typical heavy construction machinery that you may be used to, or you may see around town for construction projects. I mean, there will be track hoes and machines like that to excavate or dig the trenches. There could be bypass pumping. So you may see bypass pumps and generators to convey flow while the sewer is being put in the ground. There'll be skid loaders, dump trucks, there'll be a lot of different equipment that is necessary to make this construction happen. So, I just want to be clear that there will be that typical heavy construction machinery utilized to put the sewer in the ground.
Hey, Kurt, we got a question from Jeffrey that I think it would be applicable right now. He said, will the current system be removed or abandoned in place, or is this just additional?
So that's a fantastic question. And the answer is, it depends on the location. So for wherever we can, we will either remove the existing system or we will abandon it in place. There are some locations where the existing sanitary sewer is so close to the houses. In some places, it's actually located underneath house additions or garages. And the laterals are connected to that. I'm sorry, the laterals are basically your private line that connects to the main sewer. So in some places, the existing sanitary sewer and those laterals are so close to the houses that we're going to have to leave those in place because it's just not feasible to construct new over top of the existing. So it's a little bit of all of those questions that he asked, all the things he pointed out there. Where we can, we will either remove it or abandon it in place. And where the existing is too close to structures for us to safely disconnect those laterals and replace the sewer in place, we're going to have to leave those in service. That's a great question also. And if there's a question like, if you really wanted to dig down on what is happening on your property, obviously I can be reached after this. We'll go over this in a couple slides, but if it's a specific question about your lateral, then we'll go from there.
And just to transition into this slide, Kurt, we have a question from Juanita about when easements will be presented to owners, and that actually had an upvote, so there were a couple of questions about that, but I think you're going to get into that right now.
Yeah, so is this the next slide after the one I just did? Okay, so I will get into the schedule of when this is going to happen in 2 slides from now, but what I'll cover here in general is what you can expect next after this meeting. So most of the field work has been completed to date. So you should have everybody on this call likely got a letter back in the late February, early March timeframe that notified property owners that we were going to be performing survey and subsurface investigation. So the survey itself has been completed. You may or may not have seen our survey crews out when that was done in late winter and in the springtime. The subsurface investigation is basically taking geotechnical borings, which tell us what we're going to be dealing with when we start digging those holes that we talked about. Some of that has been done. Some of it is still to be done. So you may or may not see our drill crews in the neighborhood in the coming weeks into October. If there is the need for us to access property to take those borings to drill those, you may receive a letter from us requesting access to do that. But for the most part, our activity in the field has kind of already happened. So you won't see us doing much in the field in the coming months. But the schedule in general, the design piece that Burns McDonnell is working on will be substantially wrapped up at the end of October. And what that triggers is the easement acquisition phase, which will start pretty much immediately after that is done. And so when that happens, MSD right-of-way agents will start contacting those property owners on which we need either a permanent easement or temporary construction easement to construct the sanitary sewer. So I'll get into the timing of that a little bit on the next 2 slides after this one, but just wanted to kind of give you an idea that, you know, what you can anticipate in the future. One of the things we wanted to mention on this slide is when we do get to construction, we do anticipate some temporary road closures. We do anticipate temporary lane closures, so there will be disruption to traffic as we're constructing the project. There may be temporary times when you won't have complete access to either residential or commercial properties. That's very limited. It's usually limited to a couple hours, but there may be occasions, for instance, when the contractor is, digging across your driveway. They typically can move pretty quickly across the length of a driveway. But I did want to point out that there will be some times where there will be some access limitations.
Kurt, we have a question from Linda that would also be good at this point. Will equipment be left on the street when it's not in use, or will it be staged somewhere else?
I'm going to answer here, but if I say something wrong, Steve Roberts or anybody else from MSD, feel free to chime in. But
hey,
I
Kurt,
believe
I can take this question if you'd like me to.
That'd be perfect. Thank you, Steve.
So this is Steve Kadike, and I work in the construction group at MSD. Depending on where they are in the project, the equipment will likely stay next to the open trench that was worked on in the direct time frame. It won't be moved on a nightly basis. It'll move along with the progress of the work. As they move from site to site, they might move equipment to one location to a staging area before they get started, but the equipment will remain within the easement limits or the right-of-way for the longevity of the project until they're finished in the specific area.
And Steve, I think it's important to point out too that this is a 2-mile project. It's not going to be torn up, all of that, all at the same time. They're going to be moving along, as you said, and only tackle certain areas at certain times.
Exactly. We have what's called sequential restoration requirements that as they move through specific areas, they are required to come back and restore those within certain time frames as described within the contract documents.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Kurt, let's get back to you.
All right. Well, can you head to the next slide, please? So we talked a little bit about, the machinery that's used, how the construction could disrupt roadways and things like that. So I thought it would be helpful to show these photos here. And what they are is from the left to right, a before, during, and after. And it's a little different angle of the cul-de-sac, but it's the same general area. You can use that fire hydrant as a point of reference if you'd like. But you can see the before photo here. It's a cul-de-sac with, the fire hydrant and an inlet. The during is obviously during construction. You can see there's a hole in the ground. The trench itself has been partially backfilled. There's construction fencing on either side to make sure that the open trench is kept safe. So that's typically what you see during construction. Like I mentioned, there is disruption from machinery, and there are things that will have to get removed and replaced. But the after picture there, I think, is really telling of how we like to leave things. You can see that the driveways are new from where we had to impact the driveways. Those have been removed and replaced. You can see that there's a really nice stand of sod in the grasses, or in the yards there. So when we disrupt yards, we put sod back. So you can see that the deck and these pictures have taken really well. And so, in general, we'd like to leave things as good or better as they were before we got there. So I think this is a really telling picture of what things can look like once the project is complete.
And Kurt, along the lines, Karen had a question of, were owners going to have to put their own sod back? But I think you just answered that question, that there will be minimal impact along the way, and that MSD and their crews will put the sod back and are responsible for actually watering it to begin with until it's established.
That's correct.
All right, let's move on to the next slide.
Okay, so this is another question that we get a lot from property owners is when is all this going to happen? So we've talked about it, but now I just wanted to really dial into the schedule here. As I mentioned, our design will be substantially complete in October of this year, so fall 2020. And then again, I mentioned that easement acquisition phase for this project, Steve, I think, mentioned 50 to 60 easements. That will begin and run until fall of 2021. So, the right-of-way agents from the district will start approaching folks a couple months after we have substantially finished our design. And then that process generally we think will take us through fall of 2021. So once we have the easements in hand, there's a few other things we have to do to complete the design, and then the project has to be advertised to prospective contractors, and it has to go through the bid process at the district. And so we anticipate awarding the project, we anticipate completing the project in early 2022. And then the estimated construction start date would be summer of 2022. We anticipate the duration to be about 24 months from the summer of 2022. So, completion would be looking at the time frame of summer 2024. I did want to mention this is a tentative schedule at this point, but we are somewhat confined to this schedule based on our milestones. But this should give you a good idea of when things are going to be happening from a right-of-way acquisition phase standpoint, and also construction. But I think Andy might have mentioned this in a previous slide. Even just because the project starts in summer 2022, it doesn't mean it'll immediately impact your particular property, and it also doesn't mean that some of that disruption we were talking about is going to be for the entire 2 miles for the entire 24 months. So that's something I like to point out when we talk about schedule at these meetings.
All right, so we're going to give Kurt a chance to catch his breath here for just a second. We have a couple of questions already, but again, if you have more, please feel free to submit those on the Q&A portion at the bottom of your screen. Just toggle your mouse, and we're going to try and get to a couple of the questions that we have in the Q&A feature right now. Greg is not familiar with the easement acquisition process. Can you elaborate more on what that actually means, and is it a cash transaction?
My name's Craig Berry. I'm a right-of-way agent with MSD. I'll be more than happy to answer that one. So just to give you a little background on what to expect. As Kurt's kind of elaborated on, we need about 50 or 60 easements on this project. That also means that there's going to be a number of areas where we don't need easements. So we're going to be using existing easements. We're going to be using existing right-of-way. If you happen to be one of the folks that we do need an easement from, we will send you a letter. We will ask in that letter that you contact us within 30 days because we do want to start talking about what needs to be done on your specific property. We will have the area of the permanent easement. We will have the area of the temporary easements that we need. It will all be laid out. I will tell you right off the top that the letter we send out will just be with an easement plat. It will be a little confusing. You won't understand it completely, but that's pretty much by design because we want you to call us. We'll send an easement plat out. It won't list all the issues with the easement, but it hopefully will entice you to give us a call. There will be an offer in there for the easement rights. It will encompass the permanent easement. It'll encompass the temporary easement areas if needed, and it'll encompass the loss of landscaping if there is some. But as Kurt also said, sod and everything will be replaced at MSD's expense. All the restoration will be at MSD's expense, including fences, driveways, whatever that is. But we will have to, like I mentioned, talk to a few people out here with regards to easement rights. So we're thinking probably around the beginning of the year of next year, the letters would be sent out. Right now, I can't specifically tell you if we're going to need an easement from you, but we'll have some contact information later on in this presentation that you can certainly follow up with an additional question.
All right, Kurt, we have a couple of different questions from a couple of different folks, but they kind of say the same thing. Where will construction start, at its terminus or elsewhere? And will you start at the north end or the south end? Two kind of different questions from different folks. Kurt, you want to take that one?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, that's another good question. Typically, construction of a gravity sewer of this nature starts at the downstream end. So if you recall the slides from several minutes ago, the downstream end is the north end. So construction will start at the north end, which is up on the slide here, which is that manhole that's close to Old Warson Road. So that's typically how contractors will construct gravity sewers, is from the downstream end. They'll start there, again, which is the north end of this project, and they'll construct upstream, which is in the southerly direction, and kind of proceed in that direction.
Great. Let's go back to the sod question. People have that question a lot. Do homeowners have a say, Hannah asks, in the type of sod or fencing that is used?
Andy, I'd be more than happy to talk about that.
That'd be great, Craig.
Oh, so certainly, as part of my easement negotiations with homeowners, we will certainly give you an opportunity to specify what type of sod you want. It'll either be bluegrass, fescue, or zoysia. The other properties where we would have existing easement rights, we will try and identify what type of sod you have. We want to match it, quite honestly. And then the contractor will be required to put sod down in them areas. The other thing, when we impact a wooded area, we do not typically sod wooded areas. The sod will not take. Nobody's going to maintain it. So if you happen to have some property and the back of it's wooded, heavily wooded, I'm talking about, not maintained, we would be then seeding and strawing that area because that does better. It has it's more reliable to take, and it doesn't need the constant maintenance that sod does. One of the things that when we talk about sod too, and Steve could elaborate on this, Steve Kadike, we really don't want to put sod down when it's 90 degrees or above. So one of the things that lengthens the impact of some of these projects or some of the timeframes on your property would be sod. If we're ready to restore everything and it's August or July and August, we may have to hold off on putting sod down. The same thing can be said for the winter months too. And you're just not going to get sod during January and February. So we're going to have to delay our restoration on your property until probably that spring. That's just part of the dealing with the construction. So hopefully that helps. Again, all restoration, everything involved with this project is paid for by MSD though.
Fantastic. Thanks, Craig. Really appreciate that. Kurt, here's one for you. This is from Kathy. Is the concrete channel in some of our backyards part of an SSO?
The concrete channel could be at the point where the SSO connects, but the concrete channel itself is not the SSO. I'm not sure where Kathy lives, but the concrete channel that runs through Warson Woods along the south side of Warson Woods Drive, was probably what they're returning to here, because I think it's the only concrete channel. Or actually, there's one in Kirkwood too. So it's the same answer. I'm sorry, I'm rambling there a little bit, but so what is happening, at least at the park entrance, is that there's a pipe that connects the sanitary sewer to that stormwater channel. The stormwater channel itself is intended to convey the stormwater, the rainwater. It's not specifically constructed for that SSO. It was just the easiest place to connect the pipe from the sanitary to that storm channel to allow that surcharge flow to go through the relief valve that is the SSO. I hope that answered the question.
All right, let's go on to another one. Bonnie has a question. Part of Warson Woods Drive is very narrow. How much of the road will be constricted by equipment?
That's another good question, Bonnie. Thank you. What we're looking at on Warson Woods Drive would be temporary closures. So that would be, block by block closures. Again, this being such a long project, we wouldn't close the entire Warson Woods Drive all the way from Hudson to the park. But there will be times where we anticipate temporary full closures of Warson Woods Drive to construct the sewer. And so again, with what I kind of explained earlier, moving from downstream, the north end again, to upstream south, as we hit different blocks, we'd have to temporarily close them to construct the sewer. But after they're backfilled and drivable again, we'd move to the next block. So while it's a great question, because I've walked Warson Woods probably half a dozen times for this project, and I completely agree with you. And that's why we're anticipating that there will be some temporary full closures of Warson Woods. And I will say this also, because it leads into another question with these closures. When we do those closures, the contractor really has to focus on, allowing access for emergency vehicles and trash trucks, Amazon, because like everybody gets 7 Amazon deliveries a day now, I think. So the contractor will coordinate those sorts of things to make sure that access can still be had to properties for those sorts of activities, even when we're doing those closures.
And along those lines, you've kind of answered a couple of the different questions already on the screen. Karen had a question. Since this is such a huge project, will property owners be informed when their property will be involved? She said lots of digging, lots of cleanup. Just want to make sure that they'll know. And she also had the grass question, but I think we've answered that one. But will they get a notice when they're going to be impacted?
I can take a shot at this one too. And again,
I can take this one, Kurt.
Okay.
I'll grab this one. So during the construction process, as we get closer to people's homes, the contractors will put either door hangers or will send letters of notification to the property owners that will be affected in the next, usually about 2 weeks, just so they have some time to prepare, or if they need to move any kind of landscaping out of the way. But those notifications will go out on a periodic basis as they progress from the north side of the project down south.
Great, thanks. We're going to go back to another Warson Woods Drive question from Jack. Are there any chances of widening Warson Woods and adding some lighting?
That would not be part of our sanitary sewer project. No.
Okay, short and
I
quick.
might add something to that, Kurt. We do work with communities sometimes. For example, the fact that we're tearing up Warson Woods Drive, we have 2 choices. We can put it back as is, or there can be improvements to the roadway. That would require us to work with your community in doing some kind of a cost share effort to make these improvements. Right now, we are talking with Warson Woods about doing some things on Warson Woods Drive. Nothing has been finalized, but in general, as Kurt said, when we go down a road, we put it back as is. We don't actually, MSD will not make improvements. That's not what we do with ratepayer funds. We don't do road improvements. However, we will cooperate with communities.
Great, Steve. Thanks for the clarification on that. Here's another similar question. Hannah has a question about flooding that happens near the Warson Woods Swim Club. Will this project alleviate any of that flooding?
Yeah, this is another conversation we've had with Warson Woods, and we're aware of the flooding that happens at the swim club and then along the channel as you go north. But unfortunately, again, this is a job that's specifically funded to improve the sanitary sewer, and again, that's a different sewer from the channels, the creeks, the pipes that convey that stormwater flow. So the unfortunate answer is for those that experience that at the swim club. I have two swimmers in my family as well, so I have compassion for the fact that swim club gets flooded. But unfortunately, this project is specifically to improve the sanitary sewage system and won't really do anything about the flooding that occurs.
So we have a similar question to one that was asked earlier, and Kurt, you may just want to clarify this. What will happen to the sanitary sewer separation systems located on some of the affected properties?
I'm going to have to defer that question. I don't know the answer to that one, just to be honest. If we can't answer that with the folks that we have online, then we can certainly follow up with whoever specifically asked that question. But I would defer to maybe someone at MSD that would potentially know the answer to that, if the SSPs come off as part of this project or not.
Hey, Kurt, I'll go ahead and take that one too. So
Thank you.
as we're going through the projects, and we do have SSPs or sanitary sewer protection devices in place, our operations department will actually go through and review each of those situations to see if it's a good idea to remove them or whether they should be left in place as a precaution. So that'll be a case-by-case basis.
Great, thanks. Another question here, this one from Terry. Will straw blankets be used in the finished grade areas to control erosion and weed growth during the time when sod installation is not possible? Craig, maybe that's a question for you.
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. What to expect is, I think the best way to put this is everything that we do in our easement area, in our working zone, is the contractor's responsibility. So that goes for erosion, it goes for out of control weeds, anything in our area of operation is considered a work zone, and they will be responsible for it. So they will have to control erosion. Their means and methods will have to be approved by MSD to some degree. So there's some unknowns with that question, but it will be addressed later on with this contract.
Great, thanks, Craig.
Follow up on that one. This project will be large enough that it falls under the stormwater pollution prevention in PDES permit. So they will have to follow all submittals to do a SWIP plan, which means there will have to be erosion control measures submitted, and there will be a stormwater control plan on site at all times, and that will be modified as needed depending on what the contractor finds is necessary to control the erosion on the project.
Great, we've had some great questions here, folks. We got another one here from Linda. We talked about access for emergency vehicles, Amazon, UPS, the trash services. Will there be any restrictions for our own access to homes when the road is closed?
I may have touched on this a little bit. If I didn't, I apologize. But generally, the contractor is required to keep access to individual properties. So there may be times, again, limited times, where the contractor could be digging a trench and putting sewer in across your driveway. So your access might be limited then. But we really, hold our contractors to being able to keep access for, to residences and to businesses and things like that.
Thanks, Kurt.
If I might just follow up with that, Andy, our contractor is responsible for keeping all emergency access open during the entire project. So they will have to work around whatever it takes to keep emergency access open to all businesses and homes. So we're not going to, not allow ambulances or anything like that, restrict that type of access.
Very important, Craig. Thank you. Really appreciate that clarification. We have time for maybe one or two more questions here. We got one from Jack that follows up for Steve Roberts. Steve, how do we input with Warson Woods on the improvement process, understanding that it's not MSD's responsibility to widen the street or put lighting in or anything like that?
That is a good question. And I do believe there are some Warson Woods aldermen or who are actually privy to this presentation right here, and you could ask them. I'm a little reluctant to speak on their behalf, but you could certainly talk to the people at Warson Woods about this. Again, we are talking with them about trying to have they do wish to do some improvements to Warson Woods Drive and coordinating our two projects. So those talks are happening, and you may wish to get feedback from your alderman.
Okay, and we'll take one more question here from Juanita. Where is the main along North DePere, Warson Woods Drive, where the lateral pipe is running to the main?
Sorry, I had to hit unmute there. I'll take that one. Sorry, still getting used to this. But let's see, Main, North Drive, and Warson Woods Drive. Where's lateral pipe running to Main? Okay, so the main existing sanitary sewer in Warson Woods Drive is actually within the pavement limits of Warson Woods Drive. That would be, north of the stormwater channel. As it gets to North Drive, where there's a bridge over the stormwater channel, that existing sanitary sewer is actually still located on the north side of the creek there. So it runs through some side yards that are North Drive. It runs through a property there and then continues through the backyards of properties along Wild Deer, I believe. And then once it's through there at Wild Deer, the main continues north along DePere within the right-of-way limits of DePere Avenue. I think I touched on all the streets where that question was, but.
Kurt, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of our experts. We had a lot of really smart people here in the room tonight to answer your questions. We realize that you still may have more questions. Here is the contact information for both Steve Roberts, the MSD project manager, and for Kurt Kimmel, the Burns and McDonald project manager. If you have questions, please email them. They'll get back to you if you have questions and you want to talk with them. Their numbers are on the screen. I also want to tell you that there will be a recording of today's presentation at msdprojectclear.org/WW2/3. Thank you all very much for joining us. Steve Roberts, is there anything that you'd like to say here to conclude the meeting?
No, I think we covered everything. But again, I wish to thank everyone for joining us. And certainly you see my email, my phone number. Don't hesitate to call if you have any questions or concerns. I appreciate your feedback.
Some fantastic questions, actually some of the best questions that we've had so far in these virtual public meetings. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. I hope you have a great rest of the evening, and we'll look to see you again soon.